Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Leader with me, Wayne Fitzgerald. I'm the leader of Peterborough City Council, and this is your monthly opportunity to ask me questions about anything you like. If it's a matter that concerns you or something that you're just wondered about, I'm here to do the very best to answer those questions. And how you can take part in future editions, all you need to do is email the team at asktheleader@peterborough.gov.uk, and they'll get the questions onto the schedule for the next meeting. This time we had a bumper crop, some 11 questions, with most of them being answered today in writing, straight back to the residents. And in fact, today we've got 5 questions that we're bringing to you. We were hoping to have some people join us live. They may well do as the course of this recording goes on, but if not, we have an expert team on hand, headed by our communications person Amanda Rose, who's with us tonight, and we've got Sue Proctor, who's hiding in the background. She works all the buttons, and Claire George also on hand to ask some questions concerning fly tipping and other bits of the city centre. So I'll kick right off with the first verbal question. Amanda, do you want to let us know what it is?
I can.
And who it's from?
Yep, so this question is from Naveed Hussain, and the question is, can you please advise what measures have been put in place to tackle fly tipping across the city? Simply getting people out to investigate and then clear up is clearly failing, and pretty much every ward in the city is blighted with this problem. I continue to report the incidents via the website, but unfortunately it seems that as soon as it's cleared, more arrives. Getting the rubbish is all well and good, but there has to be more done to identify and prosecute those responsible.
Well, thank you very much, Naveed, for your question. It's one that perplexes me and every other single councillor. It doesn't matter what political party you're from, where you live in the city, but I would remind you that, as I've said many times before, it's not the council that's fly tipping. It's your neighbours, your relatives, whoever, they could be around you. We do our very best to as you say, clear it up straight away, but more appears because some people just don't care what they dump on the street. It is an illegal activity, as everybody knows, but it's something we are trying to tackle. It is a key council aim, and I believe strongly that we should get a grip of it. As well as being illegal, it makes our city look ugly and run down and has wider economic downturns, both in social and environmental impacts. Historically, fly tipping has been a problem here in Peterborough because of the type of area within the council boundary that we have. We're a medium-sized rural city with close access to isolated countryside areas, meaning we're more susceptible and vulnerable as it's happening where people can't see it. But it's built up areas and urban areas where people notice it more, which is entirely understandable. Now, we've done a lot of work recently to tackle the issue, including campaigns to raise awareness and a trial of covert cameras specifically to catch fly tippers in the act. So we are trying to do more. So rest assured, whenever we gather evidence of fly tipping, we will look to prosecute where possible. But I would also advise you that in many cases, it can cost more to prosecute than we are able to recover in costs and fines. So you must think whether that's best use of taxpayers' money. On that note, though, we have had some recent successful prosecutions which have seen a number of residents appear before the magistrates' court and receive fines. One recent case saw a man spotted on CCTV dumping wood at Ferry Hill in Carster. He was fined £120 and had to pay costs of £420. But I'd be surprised if we recovered our own costs on that. If we find fly tipping on the public highway or public land, we will investigate and arrange for the waste to be cleared. Once reported to us, Aragon Direct Services will aim for the fly tip to be cleared within 48 hours or 24 hours when it's classed as hazardous. Unfortunately, we can't remove waste that is on privately owned land, as that's the landowner's responsibility, and we ourselves could be liable for trespass or any other kind of damage that might result if we stepped onto private land. Now, Claire George is on the line also. Claire, do you want to come in and tell us how much we rely on the public to help us here?
Yeah, we really do rely on the public, and anybody that witnesses fly tipping or knows a person responsible, we really need you to contact us and provide us with those details to allow us to open an investigation and take enforcement action. This can be done really easily, either calling 747474 or online. But the more people that come forward with that information, the more likely we are to be able to get a successful prosecution.
Thanks, Claire. That's not the first time we'll hear from her tonight, as she's got more input on street drinking in a little while. But if you're ever uncertain about the types of waste you can and can't throw out, just go to the Peterborough City Council website, which is all the W's, peterborough.gov.uk, where there's lots of really useful advice on there about fly tipping. But again, it is annoying, it's irritating, and we can do our best, but encourage your neighbours, your family and friends and their friends to think about what they do and take responsibility for waste. And we offer many ways in terms of both the council to collect bulky waste, for example, and or indeed there are private contractors that can always help with that. But if you're fearing any hardship or things are a problem, as Claire said, Peterborough number 747474 and get the advice you need. Amanda, do you want to go on to our next question for tonight?
Thank you. So our next question is from Gordon Wesley, and Gordon would like to know, would it be possible to get a footpath to link up the A47 roundabout on Welland Road to the bottom of the flyover outside the flour mill? With the contaminated water running out of the concrete plant and the amount of HGVs, it makes it very difficult for walking and cycling on an overgrown muddy verge.
Great. Well, I've had a chat with our highways team and our active travel guy, a chap called Lewis Banks, who's been on our sessions before. So we always welcome feedback and suggestions from residents about highways improvements. We can make and regularly review our existing roads and footpaths to make sure they're well maintained, as well as looking at the potential opportunities for future developments, and particularly when it comes to active travel schemes, improving walking and cycling and all those things that make us fit and healthy. So he will take a look at this, and your suggestion will be considered by the team. But we're developing a major highway scheme to unlock a housing development at Norwood. The Peterborough and Cambridgeshire Combined Authorities Transport and Infrastructure Committee have recommended that funding is awarded to us to progress with detailed design and a full business case for that. As part of this, we are looking at pedestrian and cycle enhancements, and one of those options is looking to improve the footway along Welland Road. So I hope that's good news for you. We are trying all the time to look and improve our network, as I said, and a priority, particularly in the green climate that we're now operating in as a background of climate change. It's always good to improve cycling and walking options. I think there's another question on the way, Amanda.
There is, yeah. So our next question is from Simon Brooke, who got in touch with us around buses in the city. And his question is, when was the last time Councillor Fitzgerald used a bus in Peterborough? Could the same question be asked to any other councillor who may be on the session? With the loss of bus services being a very topical theme locally, the background of my question is really, how often does the leader and other elected officials actually use our local bus services? While I appreciate that the combined authority is the transport authority, I do feel that if the leader and our elected officials actually use the buses, they could have a better understanding of the consequences of these changes and the importance of working collaboratively with the combined authority to safeguard them.
I'll be completely honest and say, of course, from my personal perspective, I don't use buses that often because my lifestyle and busy schedule wouldn't allow me to rely on public transport such as buses. I cycle occasionally. I last went on a bus with the Mayor, Stephen Lane, a short while ago to the offices of Stagecoach. Although my wife, my grandson and other members of my family use the bus almost daily. So I understand the critical importance of local bus services, because when they don't run right, I do get it in the neck from my family, and they make me extremely aware of what the conditions are with the bus services and share those frustrations with me. As for other members of the council, I know that quite a few use buses regularly because they perhaps don't have cars or inclement weather. I know quite a lot cycle as well. So that's good. And we should encourage, as I just said previously, all forms of active travel. But just to make clear, everybody in terms of who does use the bus when it comes to local transport, which of course is overseen, as you quite rightly point out, by the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority, they've been responsible for passenger transport since April 2021. And in terms of the council's role in that, we're responsible for the associated infrastructure, such as bus stops and the operation of the Queensgate bus station, alongside home to school transport. And our officers work closely with the Combined Authority to feed in local information as and when necessary. But we do take buses very seriously and recognise, as I said, the importance to many, many people. So as the leader of the council, I'm also sitting on the Combined Authority board. We are an integral part of that. And only recently, when there were some changes announced by Stagecoach, I voiced my concern along with everybody else. And at the moment, the position has been propped up by some funding till April. I think there needs to be more work done on buses. But I'm reliant on the mayor here, Nick Johnson, to come up with a transport strategy. So I await with bated breath as to what unfolds in the next month. But I know that the Combined Authority is committed to exploring options to relocate the Stagecoach bus depot, for example, something I have been personally pushing for, so we can enable more electric buses being used on the roads. So we need a suitable location for that, and a feasibility study is currently underway. They're also due to consult on a new bus strategy, but that has been slow, I have to say. So I'd encourage you to look out for that and to respond to that consultation as and when it comes through. I think it's underway. Basically, buses need to improve in the city, and I'll be playing my part, and so will the City Council, as to take all that forward. I would also just add, for context, the whole Combined Authority area passenger numbers are down about 24% to pre-COVID levels, and that's 22-23. And the levy we pay to the Combined Authority is £3.5 million plus, which covers concessionary fares and subsidised services. So we are putting money and investment into bus services, but I think the whole thing needs a rethink, and I'll be doing, as I say, my bit within the Combined Authority to help find solutions for the future. So that's it on that. You are listening to Ask the Leader with me, Wayne Fitzgerald. I'm the leader here at Peterborough City Council. And if you've got a burning question or something you'd like an answer to, all you have to do is drop me an email and the team will do the rest. It is Ask the Leader at peterborough.gov.uk. And you could be on asking your question yourself in person, or indeed one of the team could do it for you, whichever you like. We'll move on to the next question, Amanda.
Yes, so Terry Brown got in touch with us, and their question was around the trees in Bridge Street in the city centre, and it reads as follows. The council were overly keen to chop down a tree that had been there long before the houses were built. Why are you not cutting back the trees along Bridge Street? They make the street so dark even on a sunny day. Not only that, all the leaves falling in autumn make the pavement slippery, and now there are stalls down there too. They and their customers are at risk of getting pigeon poo on them. Before you say it will cost money, yes, it will, but you are all happy to give yourselves pay rises. And with all the ugly flats being built all over the city, the council will be raking in the council tax.
Okay, let me deal with a couple of points first. We don't have pay as councillors, and councillors receive allowances which are not determined by councillors but by an independent body. So just putting some facts out there. Ugly flats, well, there is a need for housing of all types, which is, if there is a need, then people will buy them. If there is no need, people won't buy them, thus they won't build them. There is a shortage of housing, not only in Peterborough, or accommodation, places for people to live. So it's only right and proper that if there is demand for housing, whether it's in the city or elsewhere, then we should play a role in providing that housing, because many people are in a desperate state. If you talk about raking in council tax, we are probably the 8th lowest unitary authority in the country compared with elsewhere. So the amount of council tax people pay in Peterborough is set at 1.99% by government, and we're actually a lot lower than anywhere else. So you can take a view on that. But turning to a positive point, I agree with you. So I've actually asked in the last few months, because I found the situation in Bridge Street quite gloomy. And indeed, the trees are overbearing. They're actually, pressing against buildings. There is a pigeon infestation, which causes mess all over the pavements, let alone the new stores. So I entirely agree with you, Terry. If it was my view, if it was my choice, but I know that there are many councillors in the council who won't agree with me, I would remove all the trees. Not because I don't like trees, but I think trees need to be in the right location and the right place. So these trees were planted in the early 80s, not long after when Bridge Street was pedestrianised. And they've been a source of constant trouble, even though trees are great. Again, I want to emphasise that. But these particular trees would be best removed to tackle the very things that you say about light, about dangerous situations where it's wet and slippery. So you have my 100% agreement. Whether or not other people would allow it to happen is a different matter. But we certainly need to do something, and they need cutting back, certainly. And we did remove some time ago because the trees were all planted too close and they were actually strangling each other. So I agree. What I can do about it, though, is a different matter. But I have asked in the meantime to have them, I believe the term is pollarded, in terms of to reduce their height and mass, which might improve matters. But again, my own personal view is with you. I would take them out and go and plant some trees elsewhere where they can grow in peace and not interfere with anything else. So I hope that answers the question. And I think maybe we have one more, which we were hoping to have somebody on. But so far, we've waited a little while and maybe they've had trouble getting through. So Amanda, why don't we deal with that one as well? I think you're off. We can't hear you, Amanda. You must be muted. It's a common thing. We do it all the time. Fire away.
I am. I shouldn't be making mistakes like that, should I? So yeah, our final question is from Mick and Wendy Weavers, and it's a long one, but I'll read it in its entirety. I'm pleased to see that attempts are being made to rid our city centre of drinking and antisocial behaviour, but I'm afraid that initiative will disappear in a short space of time, just like the ban on cycling in Bridge Street. No one ever follows through on our council, and in some cases it never gets started, like the huge hole in the path on Riverside Walk opposite Charters, or the flooding problem in Burgess Boulevard, or the broken fountains in Cathedral Square. It's symptomatic of the apathy shown by our council leaders. The city centre has been in a downward spiral for years, and things took a huge turn for the worse with the loss of John Lewis. Now Beals is about to shut, and although it's not much, it is at least a store. And Marks and Spencer will be following shortly. What will we get instead? A giant pound shop, and then more betting shops and amusement arcades? Aren't there enough? The fact is, Peterborough is now an awful place to shop, and it's getting worse. Kicking out a few Cathedral Square drinkers isn't going to change that.
Well, I'm sorry that you see the city centre that way, Mr. and Mrs. Weavers. I don't quite see it like that, as you might expect, but I do have some sympathy with some of the thoughts that you might be thinking. However, I'll try and enlighten you a little bit, because most of what you talk about is actually nothing to do with the city council. Let's deal with a couple of points first. This city has less void shops than most places in the country. In other words, we don't have many boarded up or empty shops. Despite COVID and despite everything else, we bucked the trend and we remain prosperous. Whether you're a fan of what's on offer is a subjective issue. So John Lewis made a commercial decision to close their store here, which was regrettable. Everybody is really, downbeat about that. But the city council could not influence that decision. It is a commercial decision made by the board of John Lewis. We tried our utmost, as did the MP Paul Bristow, to persuade them otherwise, but alas, it failed. It fell on deaf ears. So if you want to complain about that, I suggest you write to the chairman of John Lewis. Beals, again, much press speculation about Beales, but it's a private company. I can't tell them what to do with their store or with their property. But you can see a pattern here that retail has changed forever with the advances of online shopping. And you might want to ask yourself, what was the last thing you bought from Amazon or your friends or your neighbors? Because that's what has affected the high street and many decisions about what people buy and where they buy it from. And we're all guilty of it in terms of we now choose digital or online outlets, which has an impact on the high street, undoubtedly. I've no information about Marks and Spencer's in Queensgate going, but again, it would be a matter for them. Marks and Spencer's have invested in the city. And in Queensgate, if we stay there, Queensgate will have to adapt, as it has done. It's now invested in leisure. And I know there are some new retail operators, which I can't talk about in detail, because it's been told to me in confidence that we'll be investing in Queensgate and opening new outlets. And pound shops you make mention of, they're very valuable to people on low incomes. And we don't have an overabundance of them. I think from memory, there's probably a couple, that are value shops in the city centre. And the Cathedral Square drinkers, you'll have noticed we've announced some new street warden initiatives, for want of a better word, and the police have stepped up their efforts to tackle street drinking because it is a nuisance and it's not acceptable and it's antisocial. So Claire George, again, who I mentioned a little while ago, is on the line, and I'll bring her in at this point, really, because last month we started a trial, a crackdown on street drinking and other forms of antisocial behaviour. So there's a team of officers patrolling the streets in the city centre, working with the police. Now we're currently monitoring and reviewing how that's going and whether or not it's successful. It finishes in March 23, and we'll use those findings to decide if a full-time solution is worthwhile. If this happens, there's also a possibility that small changes in scope could be made, such as extending this scheme or trial to other areas in the city. Claire, do you want to come in and tell us anything else that you might want to add to that?
I think you've covered it. We have got this team in the city centre. They've been operational now for a month, working very closely with our antisocial city centre behaviour officer as well. And it's not just street drinking that they're dealing with, but also wider antisocial behaviour issues in the city centre. And they're patrolling and enforcing our public space protection order. They have been out on joint patrols with the police. And we're also asking them to complete daily logs, because that will allow us to monitor the success of this trial and how we develop for the future.
Thanks, Claire. So a couple of other points you raised. Now, one of the ones that's not received much attention recently, you refer to a hole in the pavement in Henry Penn Walk. That's a private property. It's a private walk. It is not highway. It is not the city council's responsibility to repair it. To do so would cost a significant sum, probably close to £1 million, in order to fix that, which is a flaw in the construction borne by the developers, which I believe no longer exist. The problem is it leaves the residents, who are private freeholders or leaseholders, with the problem because it is their problem to fix and pay for. I would not be doing the right thing if I committed that kind of money without no recourse to recovering in order to fix the problem. So let's be clear, we are working with those people to try and find a solution, but it's very complex. So it's not the fact we don't care, or it's the council's fault or the council's problem. We are trying to help solve the problem because we feel a responsibility to help those residents, and it's slow progress, but I think we are trying to do what we can, but taxpayers cannot fund that without expecting the money back. Also, you talk about flooding in Borges Boulevard. That's a problem for Anglian Water. It's not the city council's problem. However, again, we're in dialogue with Anglian Water and we're doing what we can. but it is their network of sewerage. They are aware of it. And again, we're seeing what steps can be made to improve matters there. And again, we're working with those people on an officer level to try and see if we can improve it. Because you're right, it was terrible flooding and nobody wants to see that. So we're asking them what they can do to stop it in the future. I think we touched on the Cathedral Square fountains, but again, I'll just reiterate, they went wrong. And they were off a few weeks because the people fixing them couldn't find the problem. So when we did find the problem, we fixed them, they were working again. I'm not quite sure why you think that the council hasn't made good on that. You also touch upon cycling, and I happen to agree with you. In pedestrianised areas, there should be no cycling, and we try to enforce that in certain hours, but our officers can't be there doing that all day long and doing nothing else. But we beefed up our enforcement team, and they will be taking a look at that as well. But there are, I have to say to you, a section of our community in the cycling fraternity particularly that would like to see cycling along Bridge Street, and I don't agree with them, because pedestrianisation is pedestrianisation. So overall, in shopping in the city centre, we've worked hard to enhance it in recent years, and despite unprecedented setbacks like COVID-19, we've seen strong footfall maintained by the new bars and restaurants that continue to open here, which is a sign of prosperity and confidence in the city centre. We recently opened the new market in Bridge Street, which received some criticism about the size and the amount of stalls. But let me tell you, we would have lost £14 million in much needed grant for homeless families and people who are in need of accommodation. And I would also tell you that the majority of market traders on the old market never paid their rent. So there was no need for us to accommodate more people who were not paying their rent. So what we have now is an embryonic market, which can be supplemented with more pop-up stores as recently, or more market stores. And we now, I believe, have created a demand, and there are now people waiting for stalls, whereas all the people we took on originally were all paying their rent previously and were good tenants and wanted a stall. And anybody that wanted a stall and had good credit with us got one, as far as I can understand. And we are now trying to develop it further, whether it's on an ad hoc basis or providing more permanent stalls, say further down Lower Bridge Street. So we'll continue to work with all those partners as a place for new businesses to move into. So, but in conclusion, I would say the past few years have been challenging for all towns, as I said earlier, and we bucked the trend here with very few empty shops. But costs and inflation hit everybody, including all businesses. But we're weathering that storm, or we're trying to, and the explosion of growth in the city, particularly in the centre, is one that will benefit us all. Just look around you, the cranes, scaffolding, new buildings emerging on our skyline, and they're all a common sight, with plenty more being currently planned. So I am one for growth, let me tell you, because growth will bring in revenue, which will help protect and pay for services that people want and tell us they need. And the only way to do that is through growth, because we won't get the money from government. It creates opportunities for residents, better jobs, higher salaries and better mix of housing, and less deprivation for many people in the city. For the council, it means more investment through business rates and increases in council tax to fund those vital services for residents. In the coming year, we plan to invest more money in growth to drive forward at a pace our ambitious plans to increase the number of homes in our city as well, because they're much needed, attract new businesses, create better jobs, and ensure growth acts as a lever to address our inequalities. But it's not growth at any cost. It's got to be good growth, the right growth. And hopefully we take people on that journey with us. So I hope that answers some of the points raised in your question, Mick and Wendy Weavers. Always come back to me, and anybody else can come and ask a question anytime. And as a final reminder, before we wrap this session up, you have been listening to Ask the Leader with me, Wayne Fitzgerald. And all you need to do to get in touch is just email asktheleader@peterborough.gov.uk. The team will take your question. They can either answer it in writing, you can come on in person, or we'll pick a few to answer live in this YouTube recording, which people can watch back at their leisure. But for now, thank you to the team tonight, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.